So in this video we're going to continue configuring the animator graph here to manage between these different animation states according to the iState variable. I've gone ahead here and started with the idle state and created a link to the walk state, which configures a transition between the idle state to the walk state. Let's now just press play on the toolbar and see what happens. The character standing still, again you can see the idle animation playing. It reaches the end and then suddenly it enters the walk state. So the character was standing still in idle, the animation played once, and then when it reached the end, it quickly went over to the walk animation, and now the walk animation is playing on a loop. Let's see what happens now if I move to the walk state. I right click and I choose make transition, and then I click back on idle. So notice now the arrows here indicating the direction of the transition. We begin in idle. We then complete the idle animation by playing it once. We then move to the walk state, and then let's see what happens now. We begin with idle, this is playing. It reaches the end of the animation and enters the walk state. That plays once and then goes back to idle. And now this plays once again, and when it ends, it returns back to walk, and it continues on this loop. So by default, what's happening is each animation is playing once, and then it's moving to the next animation and moves back, and we've created this kind of looping logic here. So I'm just going to stop this here and take a look at the connection between the idle to the walk state. You can see here in this playback window that in this window, this range here, what we have in this range is the transition between the walk animation and the idle animation. So when I press play, you can see the transition occur here in the playback in the viewport. You'll notice that the conditions for this transition, the conditions that trigger when the idle state changes to the walk state, the condition is the exit time. When the exit time of the animation, when playback equals 0.96, 96% of the idle animation is completed, and then it will transition to the walk animation, and that is the problem. That is not what we want. We want to remain in the idle animation until the iState variable changes to 1. It's only then that we want to transition to walk. So let's select this transition here, the arrow pointing between idle and walk, and change the conditions here. We want to change this from exit time to iState. And I want to say when iState equals 1, we will then transition to the walk animation. And for the parameter connecting the walk animation to the idle animation, I want to say when the iState is not equal to 1. When it's not equal to 1, then it will transition back to the idle state. So now let's press play and see what happens. So now we've got the character, it's in the idle state, and it's reaching the end, and again it loops back to the idle state. This idle state is now playing on a loop because iState is 1. But of course, let's just select the character so we can see the character. We have the character selected here in the viewport. We have this iState value, and when this changes from 0 to 1, the walk animation will play. So now I've set it to 1, and now notice the walk animation, it's playing, just as it should according to the logic of our graph here. So I'm going to change it back to 0, and again now the player is just standing still in the idle state. I can of course change it back to 1, and again, ta-da, the character is walking. Splendid. We've got the beginnings of the animation logic set up now. In the next video I'm going to be completing the animation graph.